Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming here this late. We're here for this UNDP, UN Environment, UNFCCC side event on the initial results and future expectations from the CBIT Global Coordination Platform. The side event will last from 1 hour to 1 hour 15. And it's divided in 3 main sessions. First, a part of welcome remarks and introduction by GEF, UN Environment, and UNDP. Then we'll have a session on the key components of the Enhanced Transparency and MRV framework, with presentation from the UNFCCC Secretariat and from GEF. And then we'll have a roundtable with 3 countries that have had so far a very active role with CBIT, being those Costa Rica and Uruguay as 2 countries that have already accessed the CBIT funding for national projects. We'll have Germany as well as a key donor to the CBIT initiative. And as well, we'll have UNFDTU to present further the Global Coordination Platform. I'm very happy to see lots of known faces and friends here. So without further ado, I would ask Dustin Shin from GEF to provide his welcoming remarks.
Well, thank you, Damiano, and good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining for this side event on the CBIT and the CBIT Global Coordination Platform. It's my privilege to be here with you today. I think the CBIT is a very important topic coming out of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement, as you know, just entered into force in November, a little over 5 or 6 months ago, marking a turning point in our common fight against climate change. But there is a lot of work to be done, and climate action on the ground is lagging behind in terms of the ambition if we are to address the objectives of the Paris Agreement and the CCC as a global community. So I think the Paris Agreement includes a mechanism to raise that ambition, and the CBIT is a substantial part of that. Which is why I'm even more excited that we were able to already approve a few projects, national level projects, in addition to startup funding for the Global Coordination Platform. Within just 11 months after the Paris Agreement requested the GEF to establish and operationalize the capacity building initiative on transparency. So why is this important? Because national policy development and climate action on the ground can really be strengthened through meaningful, sound and clear data and information. Because through accurate and timely tracking and reporting of the greenhouse gas emissions at the national and subnational level, countries can better assess the impact of their climate policies and really see for themselves where there's still room for improvement also. In Marrakesh at the COP22, the GEF CEO declared the CBIT open for business. And I would like to congratulate again the first set of countries who were able to access CBIT, including Costa Rica, Kenya, South Africa, and most recently Uruguay, Uganda, and also Ghana. In Marrakesh, the high-level representatives of these countries, or some of these countries, were also present to provide some remarks and their ideas on what they wanted to do with the CBIT funding, and I found it to be very supportive of the Paris Agreement objective. The CBIT projects that were announced are tailor-made to the country's circumstances and context, and I think this is something that is very important, considering that the CBIT is open to all developing countries, and each country finds itself in a different situation and at various stages of their capacity in terms of being able to track their progress on NDC implementation. So you will hear a little bit more about these projects later, and hopefully be inspired to submit your own projects very soon, because we are open for business, and we have around 38 million US dollars available in the GEF, in the CBIT Trust Fund at the moment for new projects. We also expect additional payments to be made very soon, and additional pledges have been indicated by a few countries as well. So I think to just leave you with some ideas for projects. Projects need to really respond to the Paris Agreement transparency requirements set forth in Article 13, strengthen long-term capacities, both technical and institutional, and also feedback data and information into national decision-making processes. I think that is very important if the ambition in climate action is to be raised in the future. The funds in the CBIT Trust Fund will be used to approve projects until the end of the GEF 6 periods, which is really just 13 months from now. So that's a very short period of time, unless otherwise decided by the Council. The CBIT will then become an integral part of the GEF's climate change support in GEF 7. The 7th replenishment negotiations have started, and the first meeting was held, but a few more are to come, and we have, of course, proposed, and the GEF Council has already decided to fully integrate and reflect the CBIT, very easy to identify and to apply to in GEF 7 as sort of an integral part of how the GEF is supporting climate change going forward. We will also continue to work with UNFCCC work streams and bodies as we really consider the CBIT to be a foundation for the successful and effective implementation of the Paris Agreement. This side event, I think, is also it's organized by the CBIT Global Coordination Platform that is managed by UNDP and UNEP and UNEP DTU. The platform will bring the already approved and also future CBIT projects together to enable coordination, maximize learning opportunities, and facilitate knowledge sharing. The GEF is really very pleased to see the platform being established so rapidly. And the first technical workshop has taken place just last month already in Copenhagen, which is a few months after the initial funding approval was announced in Marrakesh. So today I'm hoping to hear from you. I'm looking forward to hear from countries also on your views and expectations for CBIT. And we will take that into consideration when the CBIT is discussed again at the GEF Council meeting next week in Washington, D.C. With that, let me thank you again for coming here tonight. It's relatively late. I think, though, with this side event, we are one step closer to making CBIT a strong foundation for an inclusive and effective Paris Agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dustin. I would ask my colleague Susan Lecoyette to provide the remarks on behalf of UN Environment.
Thank you, Damiano. Good evening, colleagues and friends. Happy to be here together with you. We are very grateful that you could set time to attend this event. And I'll be making this presentation on behalf of my colleague, Malin, who could not join us. Apologies from her. So briefly, I just wanted to use this opportunity to give you an update about the UN environment and what we think about the CBIT process in general. So just to remind us all that UN environment has over the years supported a lot of countries to meet their reporting requirements under the UNFCCC. And these processes of reporting involves preparation of national communications, biannual update reports, the national adaptation plans, technology needs assessments, just to mention a few. And I'm very happy to at least see familiar faces here of country representatives that we support on these reports. These national reporting processes has over the years also assisted some of these parties to establish some institutional structures for climate change reporting. And I'm also happy to mention that the process has also assisted some countries to mainstream climate change report findings into their national development planning processes. I have to say, though, that a lot still needs to be done. So in short, there is a need to do more and take urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. And this has been clearly shown in the recent years, especially so in the UNFCCC negotiation processes. I was just looking back 3 years ago, around December 2014, when parties agreed to provide upfront information on their intended contributions to the global agreement. This was in Lima. And within a year, by October 2015, a total of 147 parties had submitted their intended nationally determined contributions. And this number has increased to date to 190 party submissions. So that's just a period of 1 year, and all that was done. And by December 2015, we had the Paris Agreement being adopted, and the Paris Agreement has entered into force, like my colleague Justin has said, in November 2016. That was last year, late. So we wish to recognize the role of the UNFCCC Secretariat in moving these processes so fast. And it shows also the general commitment from parties to also move and finally get to tackle climate change. So ladies and gentlemen, the Paris Agreement brings all nations into a common cause to undertake ambitious efforts to combat climate change and adapt to its effects with enhanced support to assist developing countries to do so. So because of the Paris Agreement, CBIT was set up to assist developing country parties to meet the enhanced reporting requirement under the Paris Agreement. So basically, this process is going to enhance the day-to-day usual reporting processes that we are all familiar with, to include issues of transparencies and MRVs. And most of you are aware of this because you've been following different streams of negotiations. So it is expected that the CBIT will support countries to further strengthen their institutional arrangements for transparency-related activities in line with their national priorities. It's also expected that CBIT will build capacities of experts and national teams in meeting the MRV and transparency requirements under the Paris Agreement, and this can be done through provision of tools, templates, technical assistance, training, and what have you. It's also expected that CBIT will assist to improve transparency over time. And as we have mentioned, with the Global Coordination Platform, there will be a lot of networking and sharing information and knowledge amongst parties. So it's therefore clearly indicated that CBIT will support enhanced transparency and MRV systems, which ultimately will feed into the nationally determined contributions from countries. And this will inform the global stocktake process for assessing collective progress towards achieving the purposes of the agreement. So if you will allow me to just briefly mention that so much has been done and achieved under CBIT. And the UN Environment wishes to take this opportunity to recognize and appreciate the role of the GEF Secretariat in this. For those of you who were around here last year, there was a side event that was organized by the GEF and the UNFCCC Secretariat. And that was more of an opportunity of the GEF updating parties about the establishment of the CBIT Trust Fund. Today, we are here to give an opportunity to parties who have benefited or who will be benefiting from CBIT to share their experiences with you about the process of the CBIT. So I believe that this gives us all an opportunity to interact. CBIT is a very country-driven, focused process. And so we encourage all of you to really learn and interact with each other when you're here in this room. And we hope that we'll get to know more about your needs and be able to know how best we can support you. Last but not least, I wish to briefly mention what the UN Environment has been able to do under the CBIT so far. So this UN Environment has supported the preparation and submission of 3 CBIT concept notes that have been approved by the GEF. And these are the ones that my colleague Justin has already mentioned. We have CBIT for South Africa, There's one for Costa Rica and the coordination platform. And you'll get to learn more about these ideas from the various presentations that we'll have later on. UNEP is also currently supporting a number of countries to prepare a number of the CBIT proposals in readiness for submission to the GEF. So once again, I encourage you to feel free to approach us or any of the GEF agencies around here and the GEF itself to get to discuss your needs, and we will try and see how best we as the UN Environment, one of the GEF implementing agencies, will support you in this. Without further ado, I welcome you all to this side event and wish you all the best in the deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan. Let me also allow me to provide a few words on behalf of UNDP as well. You cannot control what you cannot measure. This is why effective monitoring is and will be even more central to tracking progress toward country's goal, as well as reporting on NDC progress as part of the Paris Agreement Enhanced Transparency Framework. National systems for monitoring and reporting implementation efforts will be, and actually already are, critical for putting in place effective national climate policies and for low carbon economies to be more competitive and resilient, as well as for fulfilling the main goal of the Paris Agreement of limiting the increase of temperature of 1.5 and or 2 degrees. Therefore, MRV and Enhanced Transparency Framework should not only put in place for international requirements, but first and foremost for our national benefits, as this will be instrumental in improving national climate planning and in facilitating the implementation of successful climate actions. Further, having MRV and Enhanced Transparency Framework in place will become even more critical and a key condition to keep attracting international finance, both from international funds as well as from the private sector. Further, national communications and biennial update reports provide useful examples and lessons learned on how to monitor and report. Still, as of today, only 36 countries have submitted their first BOR and only 5 have submitted their second BOR. So it will be useful for all of us to have a better understanding of what has worked and what has not worked with BOR and national communication, and try to integrate those lesson learned into the establishment of the new transparency framework and in the work that the CBIT is doing. Last but not least, we appreciate the support provided by GEF and by my colleagues of UN Environment and UNFCCC in setting up this Global Coordination Platform and CBIT, which will be key to improve the effectiveness of support provided by fostering coordination both among donors, among significant stakeholders, and among recipient countries. So again, let me thank you, all of you, for being here. This at 7 p.m. That's highly appreciated. And I will consider this welcoming remarks session over, and we would pass to 2 presentations. So thank you very much, Susan. Thank you very much, Dustin. So I will kindly ask Toby Hedger from UNFCCC to join us on the stage, and Dustin will have a presentation as well. So please, please don't go. So right now we'll have, as mentioned, one presentation from Toby and then one from Dustin to provide further information on what the MRV and Transparency Framework is and how it relates to developing countries, say a refreshment. And then Dustin will provide further information on accessing the capacity building initiative for transparency. Toby, whenever you're ready.
Is it on? Okay. Thanks, Damiano. As he just mentioned, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the MRV and Transparency Framework, specifically how it relates to developing countries, and then I'm trying to make the link Thanks. Link to CBIT, because I think a lot of times there's some confusion exactly where the two are intersecting, especially before the development of the rulebook. So Article 13 has 3 key elements, and that's reporting, technical expert review, and multilateral facilitative consideration. So under reporting, there's really nothing new or fundamentally different than the reporting that we've seen and we've been working on under the convention process for a long time. Obviously, the political and legal characteristics have gone through an evolution, but the basic building blocks are largely the same. So on the inventory, this is one reporting element that is going to become mandatory under the Paris Agreement. And the clarity that we have right now is that all parties will be expected to report on their inventories. There'll be some flexibility for SIDS and LDCs, but otherwise we know all parties will be expected to report. What exactly this means is still under negotiation and being sorted out, but we know that that element will be there. The other reporting element that will be mandatory is on information on progress of implementation of achieving NDCs. So those are the 2 reporting elements that apply as mandatory for all parties. In addition, there's one other reporting element, but just for a subset of parties that will be mandatory, and that's for developed countries and other parties that are providing financial technology transfer or capacity building support. And as you can see here in the pink or orange box, the developing country parties can or should provide information on the support that they either need or have received. There is also information to be reported on adaptation. That's the last of the 4 boxes under reporting, but it's also one of the should items. And I think that many of you already know the difference between shall and should. There's obviously political and legal ramifications there. And the shall is largely seen and interpreted as mandatory, versus should is something that seems to be up for interpretation. So some parties recognize that as a softer mandatory element. Other parties see it as not a requirement at all, and rather just as a recommendation. So that's how these 4 blocks play out. So next, move down to the consideration of these reports, and that's the technical expert review, which will occur for all parties. And then finally, there is the multilateral facilitative consideration process. And again, we don't know exactly what this is going to be, but based on submissions that we've seen so far, it probably won't end up being a lot different than what we have now, which is the multilateral assessment for developed country parties and FSV for developing country parties. And I'll talk a little bit about the components of FSV on the next slide. So this slide really is trying to tease out the different components and highlight the differences between what we have now versus what we will see with the Paris Agreement. So we have the first block on the left, which is the national communications, which came out of Convention Articles 4 and 12. The second block is really the BURs, which came from parties' efforts to enhance efforts on mitigation, which concluded in Durban and Cancun. And then on the right is the Paris Agreement, which is the transparency framework. So you can see the common elements across all 3. We've color-coded them so it's easy to see. The specifics obviously differ, but the building blocks are largely the same. So in the green is the GHG inventory, which you can see in all 3. You can also see the purple, which is the mitigation, which again is there, and also the capacity building, which is in orange. So again, specifics differ, but the components are there. The key difference is that there's no mention of adaptation under the BUR, and additionally under the national communications, you can see the white blocks, which are additional reporting elements that don't appear in either of the other two blocks. So at the broad header level, all three instruments don't really differ that much fundamentally, and that's what we're trying to convey. So here, looking at the same comparison, but now I'm going to talk a little bit about the context of consideration of information reported. So what happens to this information after it reaches UNFCCC? So for national communications, these reports are simply uploaded onto our website without additional consideration. There's nothing that is done on our end in terms of processing. For the biennial update reports, there's the process of ICA, or International Consultation and Analysis. And there's two components of that. We have the technical analysis and then the facilitative sharing of views. The technical analysis really largely mimics the technical review for developed countries. Again, politics aside, the process and the substance are really similar. And at the second stage, which is the FSV, as you know, at the moment, that's currently taking shape as a workshop under the SBI. Under the Paris Agreement, there's going to be a technical expert review. We do know that. And if you compare this with the technical analysis process, the difference appears to be largely in scope. So under the BUR, all information is subject to technical analysis, versus under the transparency framework, the report will only be subjected to review on the elements of inventories and NDC. So the other elements are not going to be considered. The other likely difference that we will see will be in the outcome of the review. And again, I say likely because it's yet to be decided. But currently for the BUR, the outcome is evaluation of capacity building needs. And it is possible that for the transparency framework, the outcome will identify improvements as well. Again, nothing set in stone, but things that we may see come down the pipe. At the second stage, so this is at the FSV stage, on the BUR side, all the inputs are defined. So the input is the BUR and the report of the technical analysis. So those are the two things that are considered under the FSV. The process under the Paris Agreement is actually not yet clear what would be the input for the second stage of consideration. So that's another thing that we that could be a key change. So taking this one step further, how does CBIT feature into this schema? So as I mentioned, when you look at the MRV transparency framework, you see the three layers, and that's what's represented here in the green boxes. We've got the reporting, the technical expert review, and the facilitative multilateral consideration. And since the modalities, procedures, and guidelines are still being negotiated, and so we don't exactly know what each of these three green boxes will encompass. We can't say for sure exactly how a country will need to respond. So therefore, we also can't say exactly what kind of support CBIT needs to provide to help a country respond to those requirements. But there's a lot of things that we believe that we can still do to prepare now without the MPGs to create the foundation that's necessary to respond to the rulebook. And that's illustrated in the capacity building category with the three yellow boxes. So we believe that in order for a country to effectively participate in the transparency framework, they will need to have a strong and robust institutional arrangement that's able to churn out a report every 2 years and able to handle the additional reporting burden, but also support the process of the expert review because there's both sides. You have to submit the reports, but then with the consideration of the reports once they come in, we're constantly seeking additional reviewers to help support that review process. Countries will also need to have in place appropriate tools and methodologies. And finally, obviously, the data information that will feed into these reports is also required. So I think for those of you in the audience, you probably can see that these are not new challenges that are very different than what we see today that developing countries face in terms of barriers to being able to report and report in a timely manner. So I think that the support that can continue to be provided needs to continue to address these gaps and challenges as we move towards embracing the transparency framework. So with that, I think I will end and turn things over to the GEF.
Thank you very much, Toby. We will have a short question and answer session after the GEF presentation. So in case you have questions for Toby, keep them a little longer.
Well, thank you, Toby. That was actually a very enriching presentation. I always enjoy being updated on what's going on. Specifically with the MPGs, I think we've heard a lot in the last few days and the last week. So I'm curious to see how that will play out. But it's also very good to hear that the CBIT can be very useful for strengthening capacity, long-term capacity, regardless of what the specific outcome of those MPGs might be. Let me use this presentation to provide you with an update on the access possibilities to the CBIT. But I'll just first figure out some technical challenges here. There you go. Sorry about that. So I think you've heard about the Paris decision, so I'll not go into that again, in particular since this is a side event at the SBs. I think you all know that the Paris decision decided to establish the CBIT in order to build institutional and technical capacity both pre and post 2020. So this is something that's here to stay. The initiative will support developing country parties in meeting enhanced transparency requirements defined in Article 13. And it has 3 aims. Those 3 aims are to strengthen national institutions, to provide relevant tools, training, and assistance for meeting the provisions stipulated in Article 13, and to assist in the improvement of transparency over time. The Paris decision also urged and requested the GEF to make arrangements to support the establishment and operation of the CBIT, including through voluntary contributions during GEF 6, which is why we had set up the CBIT Trust Fund, as well as in future replenishment cycles, and that would be part of the GEF Trust Fund through the regular replenishment to complement existing support under the GEF. This is a timeline of the establishment of the Capacity Building Initiative on Transparency. You start on the left-hand side with the Paris COP and the Paris Agreement. We have then held consultations with countries and with existing and emerging initiatives that includes the ICAT, the MRV partnership, or I think it has been renamed to the Partnership for Transparency in the Paris Agreement, as well as with bilateral agencies, given that there already is a lot of ongoing capacity building support in several countries related to transparency. We have then held a side event at SB 44 just 1 year ago to update parties on the progress and to receive input from parties directly in terms of the expectations for the CBIT. We've taken that into account in developing the programming priorities. We have a document online, it's online, publicly available on programming directions, which explains specifically what can be supported and how best to access the GEF for the CBIT. And that programming directions document was endorsed by the GEF Council in June 2016, as well as the establishment of a new CBIT Trust Fund. This is something we don't usually do, that was pursued due to the fact that we were in the middle of a replenishment cycle and it was not possible otherwise to accept voluntary contributions. So thankfully, we had established a trust fund which then was approved by the trustee, the World Bank, in August and September of the same year, and allowed us to receive initial contributions and pledges from developed countries. We have launched the CBIT formally also at the COP22 in Marrakesh. The GEF CEO declared the CBIT open for business, and we have received pledges of over $55 million at that point in time. So that was just a mere 11 months after the Paris Agreement was adopted, and the GEF Secretariat has been, or the GEF has been requested to establish the CBIT. At the same time, thanks to an early contribution, we were able to approve the first set of projects, including in Kenya, Costa Rica, and South Africa, already at the COP. And since then, we have continued to review project proposals on an informal basis and formal submissions, and held several outreach events, including through GEF expanded constituency workshops, which are held in each region in each year by the GEF Secretariat. Usually they target around 8 to 13 countries each, so it's at a regional level. And we have included CBIT in the program there, as well as in constituency meetings ahead of GEF Council, and tried to reach out to developing countries to make them aware of the opportunities that are offered under the CBIT Trust Fund. And that includes also a formal letter that was sent by the GEF CEO in September. After the trust fund was established, the CEO sent the letter to the GEF operational focal points. There's one in each of the developing countries that are eligible for such support, as well as the political focal points and the GEF council members, to invite them to consider the opportunities that the CBIT offers. Now, since then, we have also worked with the entities that manage the Global Coordination Platform to launch the platform. There was an event in April in Copenhagen to launch the platform, which really focuses on knowledge exchange, peer-to-peer learning, and the exchange of practitioners. And you will soon find online a website that will provide further information on it, and hopefully also at some point provide information on the CBIT projects, including in particular lessons learned and the challenges may be encountered, including also how they interlink with other initiatives and other ongoing support in those countries. Now, regarding the GEF project cycle, we are utilizing the regular GEF project cycle for CBIT as well to make it easier in order not to invent the wheel from scratch again. And that means we consider medium-sized project proposals up to $2 million, and we consider full-size project proposals above $2 million, which have different cycles, and that is the regular GEF project cycle. So there's nothing new here, but just to reiterate, maybe for those of you who don't know this cycle very well, the CEO is entitled to approve medium-sized projects up to $2 million without having to send them to the GEF Council for approval. So it's an accelerated approval, and that usually can happen very quickly within a few weeks, depending on the quality of the project submission. This is also how we have been able to approve the projects to date, since all of them were medium-sized project proposals. But it is also theoretically possible to submit projects above $2 million. And that may be particularly interesting if countries in a certain region maybe wanted to utilize some economies of scale and say, we wanted to get together and approve regional initiatives or something like. Then the projects above $2 million have to go to the GEF Council. So the GEF Council meets twice a year. The next work program, which could be presented to the GEF Council for approval, would be in October. We have a GEF Council meeting next week, but that would obviously be too soon for any new projects to be taken in. But in October, that would certainly be possible, and we'd invite project submissions. The deadline for new project requests for this purpose would be in September, probably early September. In terms of eligibility, we haven't added or subtracted anything. This is from the Paris Agreement decision. It says all developing country parties will have access to CBIT upon request. The CBIT provides support towards achieving these 3 aims that are stated in the Paris Agreement decision. And we have really just taken these 3 aims and translated them into potential activities that could be supported through CBIT, noting that this is a non-exhaustive list. So if a country comes up with something that is a priority for this country, which doesn't seem to be fitting with any of the activities in that list, we will still be considering it and evaluating, assessing it based on the merit towards meeting the enhanced transparency requirements set forth in Article 13. And that's obviously also flexible depending on any future COP guidance. But just to provide a brief snapshot, we support activities to strengthen national institutions for transparency-related activities in line with the national priorities. And we have outlined the potential activities in the programming directions document. So I will try to be brief and not go into those at the moment. If you have questions on them, I would be happy to answer them in the Q&A session or refer you to the programming directions document. But this is the first one, the first line in the programming directions document, where we have taken the COP decision and simply translated it into some activities that are eligible. That's at the national level. We also provide relevant tools, training, and assistance, as I stated earlier, to meeting the provisions stipulated in Article 13. And here again, you can see a list of potential activities which may be useful to you if you need inspiration in terms of what your capacity needs are and how to design project proposals. But we would be pleased to discuss this with you also bilaterally. The third line was the third and last one for national level support, was improvement of transparency over time. And also here we have a potential eligible activities in a non-exhaustive manner that may be helpful to you. In addition to the national level support, we also have opportunity to support global and regional level activities. And the first global level activity is the Global Coordination Platform that brings us together here today. We provided $1 million startup funding for it, which really focuses on sharing of best practices, exchange of practitioners, and tracking progress of the implementation, collaborating with existing and emerging initiatives such as ICAT, MRV partnership, the bilateral initiatives, and the UNFCCC bodies and work streams. And the GEF Secretariat continues to be actively engaged also to ensure coordination with other activities. So we are a member of the ICAT advisory group or board. We are also participating in regular exchange with the Partnership on Transparency under the Paris Agreement, formerly the MRV Partnership, and we'll continue to do that in the future. In fact, some of the projects that were approved already built on the support on the activities that, for instance, ICAT or the MRV Partnership provided in these countries. Instead of duplicating efforts, we're really trying to utilize the good work that has been done today, and some of the projects are based upon such initial support. To date, 7 projects have been approved. The most recent one today, which is Ghana. Many congrats also to Ghana. So that means the projects include now Costa Rica, Ghana, Kenya, South Africa, Uruguay, and Uganda. Uganda is also the first least developed country that was able to access CBIT. So many congratulations to Uganda for it. In addition to that, the CBIT Global Coordination Platform. The project documents for these projects are available online once they're approved, and these are approved. They're publicly available. But just to provide you with a brief snapshot, the The projects are really tailor-made to address country needs and circumstances, and that means they have some common elements, such as improving greenhouse gas inventories. They also have some differences because countries find themselves at various stages in their capacity. Differences, for instance, are in South Africa linked with the local university to establish long-term capacity by supporting a link between the Department of Environmental Affairs with the University of Cape Town in this case. That sort of hopefully builds a cadre of national experts related to NDC tracking and implementation in the country. And that is actually what we think of when we think of long-term capacity building, because this means that the country will in the long term be able to draw on those experts and not rely on international consultants to fly in and fly out when, for instance, preparing a BUR or a national communication or whatever else there may be in terms of tracking and reporting on NDC implementation in the future. But other countries have other priorities. In Kenya, the greenhouse gas emissions mostly result from the Afolo sector, the land use sector, over 70% to be specific. And that means that the country had interest in really looking into this sector specifically and seeing if they could verify the data and the background information on it. So this project is very much focused on the methodological frameworks for land-based emissions and strengthening national institutions also for this sector. That project is also, I have to mention, implemented by Conservation International in hand with a local NGO. So all the GEF agencies are eligible to support countries in implementing the CBIT projects. We have 18 of those, and countries are free to work with whatever agency they feel most comfortable with. I'm not going to delve into the other projects just because I feel like I'm running a little behind schedule, but we have approved additional projects, as I had mentioned before. In terms of additional considerations, if you're thinking of maybe preparing a project concept anytime soon and submitting that for approval by the GEF, the concept should be aligned with the NDC or the INDC and address identified capacity needs. Most countries have identified capacity needs, for instance, laid out in the BUR or in the national communication or through other processes. If there's no capacity needs assessment at all, then we would be pleased to support a capacity needs assessment as well. But I feel like most countries have done this one way or another and maybe wanted to use CBIT support to really delve into the matter and actually address the capacity constraints which they have. What we found also is that it's been very useful to some countries to strengthen interministerial coordination, to maybe look beyond just one ministry and say it might be useful to establish a committee or a working group between ministries, which can help reduce risks, for instance, for long-term sustainability of these projects. If there's a political turnaround or if somebody leaves in a ministry, it's good if there's a second or third person involved. So this is something we also look at when we review these proposals towards approving them. Interministerial coordination can also be very useful in terms of elevating the NDCs as a topic or the Paris Agreement in other ministries that maybe haven't had as much contact with the Paris Agreement before. So we hope that the CBIT projects will not just use data from different ministries, but also be useful to different ministries and maybe help them also identify areas where they can raise ambition in regard to the Paris Agreement implementation. We also hope that the projects will provide information back to the Global Coordination Platform, if possible, to really help other countries speed up their own processes without sort of, duplicating the trial and error on the ground. As mentioned before, around $44 million US dollars were already paid into the CBIT Trust Fund. That's as of last month. as of 1.5 months ago, to be precise. We have expected additional payments to be made since then, but there's some time lag in the trustee report, so we should have a little bit more in the trust fund even now. And we have approved around $8 million, which means we have at least 36 million available for new project approvals. And we invite and welcome any new project submissions. In terms of next steps, and this will be my last slide, is to continue to review and process projects for approval, continue outreach and coordination. We will also have a progress report, which was published a week or two ago. It's available online. I'm happy to discuss this with you later as well, which includes information on our activities related to CBIT in the last 6 months or so. And that will be discussed at the council meeting next week in Washington, D.C. We will also continue coordination with various UNFCCC work streams and bodies, and then integrate CBIT into the GEF 7 replenishment. Let me stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or my colleague Milena. If you would like to discuss programming in your country also, we will be available tomorrow. Milena also has time to meet with you and discuss your priorities tomorrow throughout the day. We also have a dedicated website on the GEF website at the moment in terms of what we've done to establish and operationalize CBIT. There's also information and a link to the project documents. If you wanted to review the project documents that have been approved so far, you can do that by clicking on this link. So I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dustin. Is there we have a Q&A sessions for the Secretariat and for GEF. Is there any specific questions, or is the well, the representation was very clear, and this is we have one question down.
Thank you so much. My name is Sandra Guzman from the Climate Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean. And I would like to know if you can talk about what is the vision of the CBIT regarding the engagement of non-governmental actors in the construction and implementation of the transparency framework. And it would be really interesting to hear what's the experience of these 7 or 8 countries, I don't remember, regarding the implementation of these processes and to what extent they have been engaging these non-governmental actors, and because at the end is this transparency within organizations, within institutions, but also transparency like for the public. So how this vision is being built in the CBIT. Thank you.
Maybe we can pick another question and then go to. Yeah, we have gentlemen here for a second question, then we go.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Moati from Zimbabwe, and we also intend to apply for these resources, but I would like to also to learn what has been some of the challenges in terms of those countries that have already applied for the resources, so that when we eventually do, we can just do it in a much more straightforward manner.
Thank you. Just allow me, in the following session, we'll actually have 2 countries, such as Uruguay and Costa Rica. And I'm actually going to ask them exactly the same question. So maybe so we can have Dustin to reply on the question.
Yeah, thanks for these questions. In terms of the NGO project design question, the projects comply with the usual GEF policies, and those include, for instance, a GEF Gender Equality Action Plan, which I think is cutting edge and the most advanced in sort of the international finance landscape. It also means that stakeholder engagement is mandated as part of project design, and we look at that as part of the review of these projects towards approval. These projects also have a second approval stage. So the resources for the approved projects have been set aside now in the trust fund, and the project preparation grant is dispersed or being dispersed. But the project is then under development that can take a few months, could take maybe 6 months. I'm not exactly sure, but it depends on the individual project. And in that time frame, consultations have to definitely take place, and that is something that we look very much after when we review the process towards approval in the second stage. So, we've been around for 25 years, and we have a very advanced project cycle. We also have NGOs participating in the GEF Council as well, and they scrutinize each and every one of these projects, and they will surely let us know if there's anything not in order. But thankfully, that hasn't been the case any time in the recent past. Yeah. In terms of challenges, the question from Zimbabwe, I would say this slide answers your question. Please ensure interministerial coordination for the reasons mentioned before, and I'm happy to discuss this with you after the session if you're available, as well as alignment with other support instead of duplication. And it's no problem if there's other support. It just should be laid out very clearly how the CBIT interlinks with that and builds on it and utilizes whatever's ongoing, as well as the alignment with the NDC, because the CBIT is supposed to implement or support the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So it makes sense that that the support is aligned very much with the capacity needs related to the Article 13 in the Transparency Agreement. And that can very well have positive spillover effects for other things, but this is at the core of the CBIT. So if you have identified capacity needs, for instance, in a BOR process or a national communication, this would be maybe a starting point to build off of. In addition to that, it can be very useful to countries, and we've seen that already when there is a feedback of data and information from these projects back into the policy design for decision makers. So we hope that the information will not just be used to report to some multilateral entity and an agreement, but to actually impact the policy design at the national level and in the future in terms of making the best use of the information data that the country has, and maybe designing climate smart policies and really accelerate the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So I think these are sort of common challenges that we've experienced and which we would suggest to you for consideration. But as I've said also earlier, country circumstances are different, and if you have any particular concerns, we would invite you to just put forward a project proposal, and we will review it, and we will let you know if we have any recommendations.
Thank you very much. Let me thank again GEF and UNFCCC, Dustin and Toby for their inputs. And I would like to invite to the following session, to the roundtable, Uruguay, Costa Rica, Germany, and UNFDTU. So thank you very much, the four of you, for being here. So as this is a roundtable, the idea would be for me as moderator to ask a few questions. And I would kindly ask you to reply to the questions in ideally 1-2 minutes. So I will start with Costa Rica and Uruguay, that are among the very first countries that are receiving GEF funding for CBIT implementation. So can you please tell us how the CBIT project would help your country in establishing an enhanced transparency framework? And where do you see the most added value of your project? So, I don't know who prefers to start between Uruguay. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening, colleagues. Thank you, UNDP, for inviting us to this side event. Transparency is a high priority for Uruguay, and our national policy on climate change that was recently approved by the National Environment Cabinet indeed has established a crucial element, the development of an MRV system to keep track of the progress of the implementation of the policy. And in that sense, specific indicators are going to be elaborated or enhanced, and a more close coordination among institutions is going to be needed in order to achieve the policy's objectives. This goes in line with the ratification of the Paris Agreement last year, through which Uruguay is committed to meet the new requirements under Article 13. To this end, there is a need to build and enhance institutional and technical capacities. Thus, Uruguay, as said before, has submitted a project to the CBIT, which was approved last March. Uruguay is highly committed to mitigation and as well as to adaptation. Adaptation to climate change constitutes a national priority. Therefore, adaptation is an important component of our transparency framework, as reflected in our CBIT project. And the project is structured in two components. The first one is related to strengthening national institutions for transparency-related activities in line with national priorities, while the second one focuses on provision of tools, training, and technical assistance for meeting the provisions under Article 13. Within the first component, the outcomes and outputs comprise the establishment of a national transparency task force, the development of capacity building needs and gaps assessment of the institutional enabling environment for transparency, a capacity building for relevant capacity building program for relevant institutions, and a knowledge sharing information system integrated into policy and decision making. Moreover, the project will facilitate and collaborate in the implementation of the NDC, and will also build awareness at a social level and enhance it at a political level. And within the second component, the outcomes and outputs are related with the domestic MRV system, improvement of our national GAG inventories, training and peer exchange programs, including activities in the framework of the Latin American network of greenhouse gas inventories that was launched last year with the support of the GSP program. So I'll leave it here.
Thank you, and I guess we're all tired and kind of hot. I'm gonna come with some reflections, and I will say that doing and implementing climate policy, it's really a challenge, and I guess we're all facing this challenge. And this added value that the CBIT project is giving us is how to do this evolution from just generating NatComs, which are useful, but if I ask the question here, can you tell me if you have read a NatCom here, one of your countries, in your countries? Can somebody raise their hands? Okay, 1, 2, good, three in the room, you see, or 4. And if I say the inventories, who's reading the inventories? 1, good, more than expected. And the truth is that we're generating these technical instruments, but it's very hard to do this link with policymaking. And it's something that we're facing, and it's something right now that we want to generate with this support from CBIT. How can we what we're calling here is our National Transparency Framework, which doesn't sound really sexy, we know, but we think it's the right name. And it's very aligned to a lot of the different improvements that we want to make in policy making. First of all, can we do this data-driven decision making? In Costa Rica, we're very committed to that. And right now we're facing a lot of challenges around that area. We know that some very good data is recollected or gathered every time we're doing our inventories, but this is not very well institutionalized, for example. And with the CBIT, with the project, what we're trying to do is to generate some interinstitutional arrangements and protocols, so we know how the data should be moving from one sector to the other, for example. And also, what are the arrangements that we have they have to be implemented, and that it doesn't depends on what is happening right now in some circumstances, that in some sectors, if you get along with the other staff of the other ministry, then you exchange the information, but if you don't get along, then this information is lost. So this kind of issues that we're facing every time have to be improved. And it's part of the things that we're seeing, okay? Can we also develop a more sophisticated system? And in that regard, we also see in other elements as part of this system. As one of the colleagues was mentioning, we are creating, for example, as part of this system, also what we're calling the 5C. In Spanish, sounds very nice. We call it Consejo Ciudadano Consultivo de Cambio Climático. In English, it sounds horrible, but at the end, it's a platform where we are calling non-state actors to be participating of this policy making. And we also see a role for them, and they also need information, and we must be providing reports. The idea or the goal that we have is to be producing reports every 2 years, so they can be doing also, and in Spanish, again, it sounds good. I don't know what's the correct word in English, auditoría ciudadana. I don't know how do you call that, that the citizens are demanding information and are seeing if we are implementing the policies in the right way. Something like citizen audits. I don't know. It doesn't sound good, but in Spanish it makes a lot of sense. And we're also creating the 4C, which is for the academia, the scientific council, and we're also creating another element as part of this system, and it's the planning unit. We also know that we are facing right now a lot of challenges of doing forecasting of the information. If we want to do new policies, we want to base them in data-driven decision making. We know that we are now putting in action a lot of different models, and the thing is, we want to institutionalize all this information and the use of these models for the future NDCs that we will be generating, for example, but not only for NDCs. We see, and it's part also of the vision that we have, that climate change is it's a development issue, and at the end, we also want to generate useful information for other institutions, and for this reason, we see that this system that we are creating will be generating information in regard to sustainable development and SDGs. At the end, we will also have to be given information around that area. We are also trying to be part of OECD, and we have to generate a lot of information and indicators around different issues. And of course, we want to talk about co-benefits. At the end, we want to talk with the other sectorial ministries and show them that climate policies generate a lot of benefits for their sectors. And of course, now with the new transparency system, talking about capacity building, talking about technology transfer, and talking about finance is also a big challenge. So with all this with all this support, the idea is to try to generate a more, what we call a more integrated, a more sophisticated system.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Very interesting. I would like now to ask a questions to Miriam from UNFCCC. So as we have learned again today, GEF is funding inter alia this global project we call the Global Coordination Platform, and UNFCCC is leading this effort in partnership with UNDP and UN Environment. So Miriam, can you explain us the idea behind establishing such a platform, and how would it work, and how would it avoid potential duplication and ensure synergies on with similar initiatives and transparency?
Thank you, Damiano. A long question for 2 minutes. I see a lot of familiar faces from last workshop in Copenhagen, where we launched kind of a mock-up of a website. So what we intended without mock-up was just to gather some feedback from countries with regards to how they see this idea of providing a global coordination platform through a website. But as Dustin said, and the idea behind the coordination platform is to enable coordination. Basically, for example, many donors are present in only one country, for example, or countries have different interventions to support capacity building in different areas for transparency, but they don't coordinate very well among themselves. And as you see from Mariana and Andrea, there are very interesting initiatives in the countries that would be interesting to share with other countries. So there are a number of initiatives, and as you know, you yourselves have been running different elements of MRB in your countries, starting from national communications, the inventories, the viewers processes, and all that. And as Andrea said, it is there needs to be steps to institutionalize these processes. So from the bottom up side, there is also a number of initiatives in the countries through support to NAMAs and other activities. And sorry for if I focus very much on mitigation, but that's my area, but also for adaptation. So there are many initiatives that are in the countries, as I said, gathering data from the bottom up. So somehow these top-down and bottom-up approaches need to encounter somewhere in the countries as well. So through the platform, we are intending to provide a space where countries can share lessons learned, initial experiences. So other countries from not only CBIT countries, but potentially and hopefully other countries as well can benefit from those emerging experiences. So as Dustin said, initially the coordination platform will be working with CBIT countries, but the idea is to also expand to other initiatives like coordinating with ICAT and other existing initiatives for transparency. So the idea is to potentially have donors and countries to upload information in the website. So this is going to be very heavy in your participation because we will be expecting that countries' focal points will be uploading information that we are in the process of developing a criteria with regards to what kind of information and how and who and when should be uploading in the website. As well as the idea of the platform is to provide a space for donors to upload information, hopefully, because they also have to inform or report to NDC progress on the support they are providing. So we also need to figure out with a lot of interaction with donors at what extent they are willing to provide information or disclosure information that in many occasions we find difficult to have access to. So that would be from countries and donors' perspective. The idea is also to maximize learning and information sharing. through a virtual library and help desk potentially. So this virtual library will be collecting existing publications, tools, methodologies, etc., that a number of initiatives have already developed. And you probably are asking yourselves, but there are other platforms that already provide that maybe is not very focused on transparency or MRV. So the idea of this platform is to gather those information and to allow you to have easy access to those information that will help on your capacity building efforts in the countries. Another element of the platform is to keep track on gaps and needs. So the platform will offer a space where there will be a way of collecting information from you with regards to what gaps still exist with regards to needs, with regards to capacity building. So it will be, again, a very heavy in your participation and your feedback. We will be chasing you literally to gather this information. And the idea is with this information to provide a platform where, for example, donors could go and check which country in which area is needing support for capacity development. And also for other countries to see what kind of needs the others have, so we can facilitate the exchange of experiences and information and share challenges as well to somehow address these issues in the countries. Another idea we have is to offer a website, a virtual meeting place. So we have a very high ambition for this, and I don't know how it will work, but what we want to do with this website is to offer something different from those existing ones and make it very interactive, and hopefully we create a community of practice similar to what FAO does with around more than 30 practitioners. So there will be this space which will allow you to interact with other countries, or donors with other donors, or implementing agencies with other implementing agencies. We will also push forward to maintain a help desk, initially for questions and answers regarding implementing transparency. But potentially in the future, we will expand to another kind of help desk, potentially to provide more in-country capacity building initiatives and so on. So in summary, the main problem this website aims to address is the lack of global platform for coordination, information sharing, and knowledge management in the area of transparency for climate change action. The platform will centralize information on state countries' national transparency systems to the support provided by donors and implementing agencies to improve such systems in developing countries, and put available information and tools and all other materials that will support your work in the countries.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Before asking a question to Germany, allow me just to ask quick follow-up questions to Costa Rica and Uruguay. It was a point, I think, highlighted by Uruguay on the Latin American network. So what I would like to ask you, if you think that South-South cooperation can play a role in supporting your work on transparency. Mariana?
Yes, definitely. Yes, South cooperation has been successful in Latin American region. There are several examples of this, and the inventory network for Latin America is an example. It's a recent, has been launched recently, but they've already done some work, and there's an annual plan, and capacity building has been developed. So yes, sure, South-South cooperation is very important for this.
Sure, certainly we think that it has a big role. We are convinced that the best way to talk is if a partner and someone who is facing the same challenges can share with you the problems and the solutions in a very practical manner. At the end, and it's something that I want to say in regard to the different platforms and knowledge sharing platforms that we have. Sometimes when you are there, you hardly have the time to go into the computer and try to see the solution. Sometimes it's easier if somebody who was facing the same problem comes to your institution and share that knowledge. And it's even better when it's someone with kind of the same situations and conditions. So we've been using a lot of South-South cooperation in different items. We are calling colleagues from Mexico and Colombia and Uruguay and Chile to learn how they have been improving their BURs or their inventories, or how they are developing indicators to do climate finance tracking. I mean, there's a lot of new issues, and there's a lot of exchange of information between partners.
Thank you very much. So now a question to Kirsten. Germany, as we all know, is one of the forefront countries on national and international efforts to address climate change. And I understand that supporting developing countries with their transparency framework is of high priority, among others, for the German government. So my question to you would be, if you can please tell us what Germany's plan to provide such support is, and what role would you like to see the CBIT Coordination Platform to play in this contest? And as we just mentioned, South-South, if you think the platform could be instrumental in supporting North-South collaboration as well.
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, I would like to say congratulations to Costa Rica and Uruguay. I think your proposals are very good, and I wish you all the best for the implementation and the next steps. May I start with the last point regarding North-South cooperations? Because what I learned from our German technical experts for the GEG inventory is that we are all sitting in the same boat at the moment. Also, Germany we made some mistakes over the centuries, and we also need to improve, and we also need to adapt the enhanced transparency framework into our existing reporting system. So also Germany is very, very open to learn, for example, from Costa Rica, Uruguay, or what is already existing cooperation with Chile on GEG inventories. And every time when I talk to my technical experts, colleagues in the German Environment Agency, they are very impressed, and they also try to improve their own system over time and be more efficient. So therefore, I see the platform to bring together technical experts. It's a very good chance. Also to improve not only South-South or North-South, maybe also South-South-North, because as I said, also we are in a position to learn. And this is the beauty to work with technical experts. They always want to be better than they already are. So regarding why transparency is one of the focus areas for the international cooperation, especially for the Ministry for the Environment. It's and what also already Costa Rica mentioned, or the colleague from UN Environment, it's and also you. So I try to keep it short because a lot of what I want to say is already mentioned by my colleagues. What we want to achieve, and we all confirmed this with the Paris Agreement, is to have a global warming well below 2 degrees. This is our goal, this is our plan, and we try to support the countries as best as possible to build up their capacities for the transparency, because you need data, facts, and figures to decide what policy do you want, what are the mitigation measures, what adaptation actions you want to implement. And you also need these data, facts, and figures to adapt these policies over time, to track progress. How far are you? Is this policy already implemented? Is it successful? Or maybe you have to change something. Maybe it's a global warming, maybe whatever. So therefore, and we also, in Germany, we are also in the same situation. We need data, facts, and figures to see if our long-term strategy, for example, which we submit at the last COP in Morocco, is already on track.
So this is kind of our wish to the world to support countries for the enhanced transparency framework. And so my last point for this question is what we as a donor are seeing in this platform is it would be a quite helpful tool also for us if countries could share their needs in this platform, because, for example, the German Ministry for the Environment, we have an open contest, the International Climate Initiative, where countries and organizations can apply for funds for their projects. So we rely on these proposals. But if you have another information resource, for example, this platform, where countries put in, okay, we have this, this, and this need, we can identify the best tailored proposal, which we can support. And therefore, we see the platform, besides bringing together the technical experts, also as a good source to get in discussion with the countries. What do you need? Is this what you mentioned on the platform? How can we best tailor your support you need? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Very interesting. As we are approaching 8 o'clock, and I'm sure we're all having also other plans after this, I would like to take a few questions to the fourth panelists here. If you have any doubt or curiosity or something that you want to learn or to share with Costa Rica, Uruguay, Germany, UNFCCC.
A beer?
A fruit. Yeah, so I guess I don't know if you have some comments as well from your side, or well, so let me thank the four panelists here, and again thank you to GEF, the Secretariat, UN Environment, UNFCCC, and to all of you for being here until so late. Thank you.
Hey, see you tomorrow. I don't know about this.
No, about this. Huh? The question is, I was thinking, because we send this, you send a consultant to our place. The project has been submitted, and one was there. Told me, they told me that the project has not been approved. Okay. The question is, my general director would like to.
Okay.
For this project, Green Climate Fund, get funding there.
Yeah.
I don't agree with him, but he's the boss. Because if I was in this place, I will find out first